Welcome. I'm so happy to have you on, dude. Peter Andrew, peterandrew.ca for anybody who has not looked you up before. I'll leave like Instagram handles and things like that, but super talented photographer based out of Canada. You've been published everywhere, it seems like. Super excited to talk about some projects you've got going on. Thanks for coming on, dude. This is a super huge honor for me.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. Honestly, I'm just a regular dude, and it's really nice to talk to you. You seem like a cool guy. So when you reached out to me, I thought, let's do your podcast. And so it was sort of like a Q&A over Instagram. Let's do it for real. So I'm stoked about it. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it a lot, dude. Yeah. When I reached out, I mean, to kind of fill everybody else in, it was kind of like, I'm super inspired by what you're doing, and the visuals that you're producing are so incredible that I'm like, I'm a photographer, I'm a videographer, I'm a graphic artist, I'm a musician, I'm all these things. So I'm really trying to find out, what my passion is and what best use of my time and how to really spread myself between all of these hobbies that I have to make something of a profession with it. So when I look at you, it's just like, you're just such a great example of someone who kind of had a vision for what they wanted to do and has been clearly executing on such a high level for such a long time.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. I do. I don't think that it's unusual to be sort of in the situation where you're in, where you're sort of like, I'm pretty good at a bunch of stuff. I don't know which direction I want to take exactly. I think there's a lot of people that are sort of in your exact same shoes, and who knows, right? You might end up being like one of the big podcasts, in one day, or it could be something totally different. Like one day you might own a super successful window company. Anything can happen.
Right.
It's a weird path, and I think a thing that keep in mind is like there's a lot of luck involved too. Like you can sort of work your butt off and everything sort of is stalling and you don't know what the next move is. And then one day you get an inbox, and it's something that changes your life. So, there's no direct path forward in a job like this. And I think that's something that's important to keep in mind. Like it really took a while for the wheels to like get traction for me. And it's been a slow thing. And somebody told me way back that it takes 10 years to grow a business. And I think at the time I was like, fuck, that's a long time. But
right.
I mean, in hindsight, it's kind of correct. It does take a while of sort of proving your track record before things really take off. I mean, that said, I'm sure there's people out there, they had one successful project and the next thing you know, they're like, living on a boat somewhere, but
sure.
That's definitely right. That's not my journey. You know?
But that's definitely that's the exception to the rule, I think, in most cases, right? I mean, not everybody's that lucky, like we're talking. Like, I mean, there is luck to it, and for me, like, the stuff that I've been working on recently, it's a lot of very like corporate, video kind of work where it's still involving storytelling, but it's very kind of plain Jane. There's not a lot of like room for super creative aspects to it. So,
well, I mean, I'll tell you. I still shoot jobs that sound very much similar to that. It's not all hanging out the side of helicopters. In fact, to this very day, if it's the right person and it's the right sort of budget and the right arrangement, I'm still shooting portraits in boardrooms too. It's all part of it. I think what's nice is as your company grows and your experience grows, you get to sort of pass on jobs, which initially wasn't the case. I mean, I was, and I still am, a working photographer. If you want me to work with my camera, I'm there to do it. I take a very blue collar approach to the whole thing, and slowly there's jobs that you can sort of start to pass on. Back in 2016, I was like, all right, I think I'm done with weddings. It's not something that I feel passionate about, and it serves a purpose. And I learned a lot shooting weddings, but at the same time, it's just like, I'm kind of want my weekends back, and I'm not, super stoked on a Friday night to be waking up at 7 a.m. to drive out somewhere to shoot a wedding. And that's one of the first things that I was like, okay, I think I've graduated now, and I'm not going to be doing that. That said, in the right circumstance, who knows, maybe I still would shoot one if it sounded like fun and it was something cool and whatever. So I don't think there's any shame in maybe shooting some like less than stellar corporate gigs, and
Right.
treating those kinds of gigs as though they were, something bigger than they are is a good way to sort of get your name out there and get people noticing what you're doing. If you treat your like $1,000, whatever it is, corporate video as though it's $100,000 or $20,000 corporate video, and you make it look that way, then your client's probably going to be blown away. They're going to recommend you to their friends, and and it snowballs that way. Like, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Don't be bummed out because you're sort of shooting these meat and potato gigs. I mean, not just you. This goes for anybody listening. But I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Like, that's your training for when hopefully one day, Adidas calls you up and says that we want you to shoot some video of one of our Olympic athletes or whatever, right? Is your training for that is shooting those lesser gigs and treating them as though they're more important than they are.
I'll definitely share some work with you, after the podcast episode and whatnot, just so you can kind of take a peek at it if you want to. But, a couple of the pieces that I've done recently, like I was working with a guy who, super nice guy, got really tight with his family. And, we were doing a lot of the corporate stuff together for a while, and he unfortunately passed away from COVID. So That was one of those stories where I just did a piece basically with his wife, basically talking about, how they met, when he got sick, when he passed, and like how that affected them and their family. And, from a aspect of like, talk about pulling heartstrings on a project, like that definitely really was one of my favorite things that I've done in recent history, because it was so passionate for me. And I was able to really like stretch my creative bones a little bit with like, coming up with a cool sequence to try and tell the story more and express, how hard that is for them, and, what you don't expect hitting you in that way, right? Like, you never saw it coming. Even she says in that little mini doc style type piece, she knew he got sick, but didn't think he was like in danger, so It's just like certain things really hit and heartstrings get pulled. But trying to take more of a 2 ears, 1 mouth kind of approach to this talk with you, because I'm so interested to hear of like how you got started. I mean, your work is phenomenal. So, I mean, you've got a very specific style that, I mean, truthfully, every time you post something, I'm just like blown away with how crazy sick it looks. How did you get your foot in the door to photography to begin with? Or was that even something that was the start?
It was weird. Like, I'm born in 1982. So like right around the turn of the century, I was graduating high school, and thank God in my high school, they had a very sort of crude early form of like video editing class. It was Adobe Premiere, probably version 1.0. This is like circa the year 2000 or 1999 or something. And I started editing video and teaching. The instructor, the teacher at the time, was a really nice guy. I still talk to him, and he was, had a rudimentary knowledge of the software and sort of showed it to me. And I immediately knew that whatever this was, I was going to do a version of this for the rest of my life. Like, I loved editing video. And, one of the first assignments was like, we basically had to take the Canadian national anthem and make a reel to accompany the music that, I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, TV would like turn off at 3 a.m. or 1 a.m. or whatever. And when it turned off, there'd be the national anthem, and then the music would play, and then there would be visuals of, like soldiers marching and flyovers of like Niagara Falls in Canada anyway, or whatever. And so we had to sort of cut together a reel that would go with the national anthem as though it was getting put at the end of the, the network sign off, I think is the name of that. And so I edited together like a really good project, basically based off clips that I found. And he was like, this is amazing. He's like, if this was the real thing on the network sign off, it wouldn't look out of place. And I was super, it just felt good. And I wasn't great at school. If I didn't like something, I sucked at it. So if I didn't like math, like I could get my like passing grade, but I wasn't passionate about it at all. And this was like the first thing in school where I was like, I got 100% on the assignment. The teacher patted me on the back, figuratively, and was like, look, man, this is great. You're doing good. So it was a really nice feeling. And I knew right then and there that I was going to do something to do with media or video or photo. And then I started working in the school got a bit of money from a big network here. It's called Rogers. It's like it's like a Canadian version of like a CBS or like a, whatever, NBC. And they funded this school to have like an inbound television station. And I was the editor, and every morning the announcements were sort of like clipped together to look like a little TV broadcast. And it went really well, and people responded to it, and the school would like brag, it was like one of the cool things that the high school was doing. And it sort of, it was on the local news or whatever. And again, it was just a nice feeling. I was like, I'm good at something. I'm finally, like academically excelling at something. And that was sort of the start, but I didn't know I was going to end up doing photo. Like that realization really came when I started working as an assistant, in my university years. I went to school for like a general media arts type program here at the University of Toronto. And basically I started assisting on film sets, television commercials. Like one of the jobs I worked on was this big Kia car commercial. And, on a film set, I think a lot of people who might have worked in the field, or maybe they don't know this, but, it's a huge team. Like these television commercials would have like 80 people on set. There's the guys that like do the camera stuff. There's the guys that set up the lights. There's the guys for audio. There's the guys for special effects. And if you're new, you're literally starting at the bottom. So you're the guy like, collecting garbage bags and moving trucks around. And I was like in my early 20s, and I was like, I'm not learning anything about filmmaking except that like, the sets are huge, and there's a very distinct hierarchy between the people that get to make the creative decisions and like literally the people that are there to like drive the trucks that move the equipment around. And I wasn't, I was a little disheartened by that. I still thought I wanted to direct or do editing or something in that world, but I just knew that it was going to be, a weird journey to get there. It's not like now where, we all have these like amazing cameras, video or stills. And if you have a good idea and you have a computer and a phone, you can make a pretty cool movie or a music video. If you're a 16-year-old kid and you're talented, you could do it. Where back then,
I was just talking about this with somebody where, it's the old VHS kind of like tape recorders, right? Where you're starting and stopping each scene because editing software didn't exist. So you had people that were really crafty about calculating their shots and dialing that stuff in. So each scene cut together in basically on tape without doing really any post production to it. It was like those to me, I grew up just at the tail end of that. And almost a little bit of a shame to say that I've grown up in the digital side of cameras more so than I ever did with film. I was talking about it with somebody else that like film and like medium format's one of my favorite looking, types of photography. Yeah. But I'm truly like afraid to like pick it up and try and dive into it.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, like I love the analog feeling of shooting film. I learned, in university, the first time I ever took a photography class. I never took photography in high school. There was, like I said, there's that one class where I kind of learned to video edit, but I mostly taught myself. But photography wise, I was self-taught until university. And in the tail end of my university, I took a photography class, and it was analog. It was darkroom. We used 35 millimeter, and we were exposing, the film in the darkroom, and I learned about printing and stuff like that. So I have done it before, but I'm of the school of thinking that like, there's a place for that, and there's a beautiful look and feel to analog photography, and I don't want to dismiss that. But what I'm really interested is making, as resolute and as detailed images as possible. And right now, with the technology that exists, if you are fortunate enough to, use the best digital equipment, then you are, in my opinion, going to have a result that's more like the kind of images that I want to make. Like I'm curious about, really getting the most detail and the most definition out of my images. So I'm not a guy who's like really geeking out about what analog camera something was shot in. I'm curious about what that image looks like, the images that inspire me the most. I don't care what camera they were shot on necessarily. Like, it's cool if you shot that with an 8x10 camera with bellows, and that's all. That's amazing. I mean, all the power to you if you get the best result that way. that's great. For me, I'm really interested mostly in the end product. I don't care what camera it is. Like if Samsung or, Panasonic has the best camera right now, then that's or what I consider the best camera that's going to get the best results for what I'm doing. That's the camera I'm going to be using. Right. But that all said, I do love the sort of beauty of analog cameras. I love the sound they make. I love the design of them. I get it. I like vintage cars too. Like I think that like trucks from the 70s and 80s are the coolest looking trucks. But if I'm going to try to drive across drive from New York to LA, I'm going to do it in a brand new F-150.
Sure. 100%.
Versus some like 77 Chevy or whatever, And I just think it's like a pragmatism in my own work. But I don't want to take anything away from people that are, geek out about analog cameras, 'cause I get it, but it's not really what I'm into. I kind of want the camera that's going to get the best result. Most reliable.
I think the main thing that I've noticed when it's people talking about analog and like film is like there's a sense of like romance that like comes across with it. Like there's that feeling of like taking a photo and not having that immediate gratification of being able to like look at your proof right away. That really like sets it apart in most cases for people, which is, to me, that's the part that's like, I trust myself. I have a good eye. I can shoot a photo and be pretty confident about, my settings and how I'm going about it if I were to try. But I've definitely grown up in digital. So there's definitely like that, that fear of like, man, I just don't want to fuck this up. You know what I mean? Like it's,
I hear that. I will say too, like I learned on analog and having that groundwork, that knowledge of like, you actually understand the sort of math or the calculation you have to be making in order to make a properly exposed image. It's way easier to fuck up if you're shooting an analog. You have to actually know photography in order to get a proper exposure. So I for anyone who cares or for what it's worth, I think that it's a good exercise to learn to shoot an analog and then apply that, to all photography. I mean, it helps when you're exposing on your iPhone, even if you know what f-stop means and what shutter speed means and all that stuff. So it's worthy exercise. And I understand the nostalgia in it too. I don't have and I have a lot of friends obviously who are photographers, and a lot of them that are older than me and far more successful, but like they do have this sort of dismissiveness about all photography now because it's too easy and it's too much is done for you, and you don't have to know that much and it's not hard. And I don't necessarily agree with that kind of attitude. I think that it's great that you can get a professional looking image. Like for almost anybody can get a professional looking image because the cameras are so good. I look through my mom's photos on her iPhone, and she's like in her early 70s, and the photos look phenomenal because it's all it's all perfect. The cameras are great. They auto adjust and everything like that. I think what's most interesting to me is really the content of the image and not what camera you're shooting it with. And I think that, that's really what I'm getting at. That's the theme, is that, I care about the content way more than like the process to get there. And if you shot, like there's so many great images that are shot on an iPhone, and I don't care. Like it's right. I don't care if you're shooting that on some like vintage Hasselblad that like belongs in a museum case, or if you're shooting that on an iPhone 10. It's like, if it's great, it's great. That's it.
Right. I completely agree. Yeah, it's actually, I mean, you mentioned vintage trucks, right? I mean, I'm a big fan too, but that's actually probably admittingly where I stumbled on you initially was McKinnon, him and his F-150, right? Like super sick old school truck. And I've been following him for a long time, and he definitely is the one that kind of like introduced me to your work. And it's one of those things that like, dude, your eye and the detail for like the nooks and the crannies on some of the stuff. I mean, it started with a golf ball, right? That was the first one that you shot in like a high res.
I guess that was like the original camera test was back in whatever it was, 2005, 2006. I shot a golf ball on a white background. And then what Pete was showing in one of his videos is that I actually reshot it with like 150 megapixel camera. That's
sick. Yeah.
Which is image stacked, and it, that I actually have to print that image. I've yet to print it, but I shot that like, right before Christmas. And, so it sort of comes full circle, because one of the things I guess my work has sort of become known for is isolating objects on a white background. And so I returned to that exact same golf ball, whatever it was, 15 years later.
Sure.
And yeah, so I think it's cool. Like I love sort of finding objects out in the world and then placing them on this pedestal, if you want to call it, and
sure.
And being able to sort of like, fetishize that thing or stare at that thing in a detail that's, impossible without photography. And I think that's sort of the magic of those kinds of images. I hope that's what resonates with people about them.
I mean, you've got a couple different collections of things, I'll call them, from your photos. Like I know you did like the Overpass series, which is, to your note of like helicopter status, anti-drone, realistic, high, high shooting rate, like the coolest stuff ever. And then my favorite is probably the collectibles with like stamps and coins and all that kind of stuff. I mean, to me, there's so much character coming through on this little stamp or, a coin that's been, in however many pockets through time.
Yeah.
There's something really cool about these little things that tell such a huge story. I think my favorite, and it's probably, one of the most, I guess, jarring at first, because it takes you back, but the Point Blank series that you did with all the different handguns and, I'm assuming there's a couple of machine guns in there. Super cool series that like, it makes you feel something, and that's super sick.
Yeah. I think you said something really important, which is it makes you feel something. I think, there is like looking for something that is profound, not just in photography and whatever you do, I think is paramount. That should be the first thing you're trying to do is to find a subject matter that's profound. I mean, I would think, but I don't think that's how most people approach, whether it's photography or whether it's, anything. If it's a job that you're doing on your own time for yourself, you should be trying to find something that's profound, something that makes people feel something. I think for me, I've always just thought that that's the point of this whole thing anyway, is to make something special and to make something that people are going to feel something when they look at it. I think that's a really important and a really good barometer, like for people that are like, I don't really know what I want to do. I don't really know what I want to shoot. I don't well, I don't know. Like, there's something out there for almost everybody that they're actually interested in. Like, whether for a guy like you, it might be vintage trucks, or for somebody else, it might be some, rare form of orchid that's out there in the world that they really know about. Or maybe it's somebody who's like, got a collection of like Starbucks Christmas disposable cups that goes back to the year 2000. Like, I mean, there's something interesting everywhere.
Right.
It never ends. Right. It never ends. And I think that like, the exercise should be, look around, see what other artists are doing, and through history too, not just on Instagram. Not that there's anything wrong with looking for inspiration on Instagram either. I mean, I do it too. I was going to say I'm guilty of that too, but I don't think there should be any guilt associated with that. There's lots of beautiful stuff on Instagram. Right. But I think that there's also, years and years of architectural history books and museums and it's just stuff out there in the universe. I could pick up the paper sometimes and read the story, and then there's something there that gets me inspired. Like I was reading about how in the Ukraine they blew up the largest plane in the world, the Antonov 225. It's a plane that the Russians developed, or the Ukrainians developed, and they're part of the Soviet Union to carry around what was going to be, the Russian competitor to the American space shuttle. So then in the 80s, right at the tail end of the Soviet Union, they built this giant plane, which is 6 engines, and it's the largest jet engine plane ever constructed, which is the Antonov 225. And now it exploded because there was a firefight in the airport where it was housed. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how cool would it be to do a photo of one of those engines before it was destroyed, unfortunately, but like, just isolate one of those engines and photograph that. And I mean, that's something that, for sure, if I saw that on a wall, I would stand in front of that and be like, "This is unbelievable," And then, so, and that's just something that I've kind of just came to me. I'm not saying everybody's going to think it's cool, but to me, that's like, I would die to get the opportunity to shoot that thing.
Right.
And that's just something that I just kind of picked up on from a news story. I didn't really know anything about it until then, or whatever, you know,
right.
I wasn't familiar with it. And so I kind of think that like looking for those details, you know, in throughout the universe is just a really good exercise, you know, like what's the smallest dog in the world? What's the biggest dog in the world? What would it look like to take a picture of those two things together in the same room? Like,
yeah,
you know, there's just stuff. There's just stuff that's cool. And and there's stuff too, like that photography is the perfect medium,
right,
to express that to people, right? Like you're not going to show how diverse the canine species is between, you know, some 400-pound dog and some 2-pound dog through writing and telling people about it. You got to show them. They got to see the visual. And like that's where photography comes in. And that's where like photography does have this unique power to like really outline in no uncertain terms different things, you know.
Well, to piggyback on kind of the collections aspect, right? Like you just did a project, More Than Zero .club, I think is the website for it, but it's an NFT project cataloging the Canadian pennies from a certain year to a certain year before they were discontinued. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I think you guys in the U.S. you guys still have the penny, right? They still manufacture it. Yeah. So in 2012 they got rid of it. They said like, you know, this actually doesn't have any value. It costs us way more to make a penny than a penny.
Right.
So we're just going to round up or round down. I don't even fucking know because it's 5 cents. It doesn't even matter. If 1 cent doesn't matter, 5 cents barely matters. Right. So they basically just got rid of it in 2012. And so when, you know, I was kind of like, I'm fortunate to have like some collectors that, you know, hit me up from time to time and they want some artwork for their house or for their office or whatever. And, you know, slowly the sort of like rumbling about NFTs happened, you know, maybe around this time last year, back in 2021. And I'd have a few clients be like, oh my God, we just bought your piece. We love it so much. Have you thought about NFTs? Have you thought about NFTs? And that sort of turned into like, you know, 20 or 50 of those conversations. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to do one. I want to do something special. I think that because it is NFTs and there's a lot of resistance to them because people are like, what? I'm just buying, you know, a digital copy of an image. So I really wanted to sort of give people something special, which is unavailable.
Yeah, maybe explain NFTs in general, because I know when we were kind of like tossing around ideas of like what we'd cover, kind of talking about today.
Yeah,
we kind of went through that, and I was very candid about it. I know jack shit about NFTs, so I know that, you know, probably the little education that you have is probably more than I've ever heard from anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm by no means an expert, but I do feel like I've like educated myself definitely way more than I knew this time last year about them. And basically what it means is like I have an item that is digital that I can 100% verifiably prove is an original. And that's done the same way that cryptocurrency is sort of verifiable, is through a blockchain. So there's a code associated with that image. And I can prove to you 100% that the image that I have, the file that I have, is the original that has been authorized by the artist. In the same sense, if you have, you know, a print of mine or of Ansel Adams or whoever, you know, you can go online right now and Google my name and do an image search and find the most high-res image of that image that you're looking at available online. And some of them, you know, are large enough to print, and you can print it and hang it on your wall. And the difference is if it comes from me or it comes through a gallery that represents me, it comes with a certificate of authenticity. It's numbered. It's in a, you know, and it's in a, there's a document, a spreadsheet associated with all my bodies of work. And it's got a, you know, it's got a signature on it, and it's got a number, and it's got an edition on it. And you can basically one day, if you were going to go sell that piece off your wall, prove that this is an original, this is approved and signed by the artist, created by the artist. And in theory, it makes it more valuable than the piece that I can, drag and click into my printer, print off and put in a frame and hang on my wall.
Sure.
So same thing here. Like in the NFT space, you have something that's guaranteed as the original, and there's inherent value in that. If there's a group of people that want to have that thing, you can say, well, I have that thing. It's not a replica. It's the real deal. And I can prove that to you. So that's sort of the technology behind NFT. And what's happened is there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are interested in collecting these things. And therefore, because you can prove that you have the real thing, there's scarcity and there's value. It's basic economics. So that's why you see NFTs that are selling for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Anyway, so when I decided to sort of enter this, the NFT world with my own work, I wanted to do something that was a little bit different. And I think that what I really wanted to show people or give value to people is that, like, if you buy an NFT from the More Than Zero NFT project, you are getting a one of one. It's not like that penny is one of 20 or that penny is one of 5. The penny that you get if you enter this NFT, this NFT launch that I'm doing, is 100% special and no two are alike. And what's really interesting about them is that they're cool. Like, if you look at them in extreme detail, like I've done with all, my sort of macro work, but these pennies it's like a fingerprint or a snowflake. Each one has its own scratches and has its own sort of personality. It's almost like with the sort of oxidization that happens in pennies too, like copper goes green and it's almost got its own like geology. And I captured them in this extreme detail. So I think that there's something special about each and every one of them. And I didn't want to do a project where there's like 10,000 of these items. I wanted to make it like still kind of rare. So there's 551 individual NFTs. There's incentives too. Like, if you buy one, then you're automatically entered into a draw to own a print that is either small or big, or there's a sort of scale. If you buy 3 NFTs, you're automatically getting a signed print that comes with their certificate of authenticity. So it does actually come with a physical thing as well. And yeah, I think that I wanted to do something special. I didn't want to just like take the work I already had, slap it onto OpenSea and be like, okay, I'm selling NFTs now. I really wanted to come out with a project or a sort of idea. Like, so much of the language between traditional currency and the language of NFTs and crypto, there's so much overlap, right? Like, you mint an NFT, it's a coin, Bitcoin, or it's a token, and all that stuff. Sort of, obviously, there's a sort of irony in the fact that, like, we are minting NFTs of objects that were actually minted by the Royal Canadian Mint. So I think that was something that I was interested in, and I wanted to sort of, bring into the NFT space. And we'll see. I mean, it's been really fun.
It's a super rad looking project, dude, for sure.
Thanks, man. Yeah, just the shooting of the project was nuts, right? Like, we were in the studio for 3 days, and you sort of have this jar of change in front of you, and you like put it onto the thing, take the shot with the super camera, it pops up on the monitor, and all of a sudden, you're looking at this like crazy object that, like, when we're looking at it with the naked eye, all that detail is sort of lost on you.
Right.
But in blowing it up like that, and each one was different, and then we put it to that time lapse, and we were super excited.
Which was super
about
cool. Yeah, that's a really nice little addition. It was just watching all the years just start piling up. That was super rad to watch, dude.
Thanks, man.
What I mean, I know that you've been in like the macro space for quite a while, but I mean, I guess the main question that comes to me is, like, what inspires you? Like, is it, I mean, obviously you've got one of those brains that like looks at something and like you said, like small dog and a big dog. Like, I want to see both of those things. Like, what does that look like? Like that kind of concept, like your brain and the way that you're ticking and spinning, it's super rad. And I'm just kind of curious, like, where do you pull inspiration from on a daily basis?
I think the short answer, unfortunately, is I don't know, but I do think I'm a really curious person. I think that I'm not somebody that gets bored easily. I think that I'll run out of life way before I run out of things I'm curious about.
Right.
I think that like it's just, there's so much out there, and there's so much history, and there's so much weird things that people have tried and built and fucked up, and it's just all out there to be sort of soaked in. I mean, I can get lost reading Wikipedia for, if I can't sleep for a few hours, and I go down a rabbit hole, and
right.
There's infinite information. And I think that, I don't know, I think I'm sort of blessed with that curiosity. I don't think it exists in everybody, but I think
I agree with that.
But you have to train it.
Sure.
You have to train it. You have to try weird shit. You have to put yourself in the weird situations. Like I've been to really nice restaurants, and I've also, been drunk at dive bars, for
totally.
Like it's that sort of high low, and that goes for everything. I'm not interested in just sort of like, only living in one place and only knowing one group of friends
just
that all sort
in a
of
certain
like,
lane.
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's no problem with this, but I personally couldn't do this. But like, I think a lot of people sort of like grow up and go to high school, and then they stay in that community, and then they have a family, and then, then they sort of watch their kids grow, and then their lives become their kids' lives. And then, and then you retire, and that's sort of it. And like, right. I think that I really want to taste the rainbow. I want to do weird stuff, like, I don't know, like it's not interesting to me to just sort of like sit and be entertained, but that to say, like, look, I'm a normal guy. I fucking watch Netflix, and I, take a nap, and it's not like, sure. I'm like, constantly walking around my neighborhood with a magnifying glass trying to like find cool shit on the ground,
Right. Yeah. I mean, dude, you're fascinating with, watching like, and to me, I think the philanthropic side of stuff that you're doing right now too. I mean, you did the Ukraine subway tokens, which I know was all proceeds went to those efforts, which I think is rad.
Thank you.
That was kind of the first thing that I think I saw that I was just like, I did a deep dive into like, who is this guy? Like, this is sick. Like what you're doing. And I've always been kind of in that place. I mean, this is more from the songwriter perspective for me, but yeah. I mean, when I write, obviously it's coming from a very personal perspective for me, and it's usually related to like my story, and like what I'm thinking and feeling about a certain topic or a relationship I went through or whatever it may be. Right. But it's that twist on things to like make it something that can be perceived by others, and like they can process it in a different way. I've always been really like inspired and a little bit honored that somebody will walk up to me after they hear a song I played, and they're like, "Oh, was that about this?" And I, kind of kindly say, "No, but that's incredible that that's what it is for you." Yeah. Like that to me, that's been the biggest part about the songwriting aspect of my life. That's always been super interesting, is like how people can take something that I made and kind of like rinse and repeat it in their own head and spit out something completely different. And I find that like a lot of your work does that for me. It makes me feel things in that same kind of way. So, I mean, I'm just very impressed with, I never really knew much, or never really took a step into the macro photography world as much as I've kind of like dove in recently, kind of going down the rabbit hole of looking at your work. Mm-hmm. And it kind of trailed me into looking at other photographers that are specialized in that kind of field. And I don't know,
that's
dude, it's super cool what you're doing. And, it's been really interesting to like kind of have my mind blown a little bit by what you do for a living.
I mean, thank you. That's very flattering. Like I definitely, I appreciate that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, the fact that it makes people feel something is amazing, because, I don't want to say I'm conceited, but I'm sort of trying to entertain my own curiosity most of the time when I'm doing these projects. And the fact that it resonates with people is almost just this, unbelievable bonus. But at the end of the day, like when I'm coming up with ideas or thinking about things that I want to do, it's like, it's usually because I want to see what that would look like. And right. I never know exactly what it's going to look like. It's a weird feeling. Like when we shot this project I did called the Uncanny Valley Portrait Series, and I got permission from Madame Tussauds Wax Museum in Las Vegas to go in there, and basically it was incredible. Like almost do whatever I want. So I went in there with my friend Cody, who was my assistant at the time, and we started shooting these portraits of these wax figures. And it was a test. I wanted to see if I can photograph them in a way that would fool the viewer into thinking that they're actually looking at the real thing. Like you're actually looking at, whatever, Justin Bieber, or you're actually looking at Bruce Willis. So we photographed these wax sculptures, and I remember, and again, it's a process of experimentation. I didn't know it was going to work. And I remember when the first one came up on the monitor, I wasn't looking at the monitor. I was looking through the viewfinder, and I could hear my assistant, like, just being like, whoa. And I was like, okay, it worked. And that's basically the whole thing, it's just a test. It's just a test. And then it sometimes turns into something, or sometimes it doesn't turn into anything. Right. And it's amazing that people, these tests sort of resonate with people, and it works, and that people are excited about it.
Well, to piggyback on that project that you did, I thought it was really interesting that you kind of took that one a step further, right? So in the local areas, there's those, whatever what do you call them? Like the poster kind of like holsters or what?
Like they kind of look like, like bus shelter sized,
right.
Billboards, or like, out of home advertising spaces. They're
right.
These glass cases that are like around 4 by like 6 feet high and 4 feet wide or something like that. It's like a standard size. Yeah. And so I took those images that I shot at the Wax Museum, and I sized them and printed them exactly to spec of those glass advertising cases. And they're just, all you need is a screwdriver to open them up. So, and they're all vacant, by the way. There was no ad. There's some, right. I don't even really know the intricacies of it all, but at the time, the city of Toronto, where I lived, was going through this sort of shift in what kind of advertising was allowed and what wasn't allowed. And so all these sort of, all these billboard spaces, these glass billboard cases were empty. And so I populated them with portraits that I'd shot at the Wax Museum and just left them up there for, a few days. And then people started, because of social media, people were like, what is this? Is this some weird new movie that's coming out? Is this like, what's this advertising? Because there are these spaces that are so obviously, we recognize them as advertising spaces. That's where right. like the Coca-Cola ad goes out, or the new Star Wars movie, poster goes into. And all of a sudden you have like a picture with Britney Spears with zero explanation. Right. And so people started really freaking out and taking photos and posting them on social media, and the local media got involved, and like the sort of like, the local news channel did an interview with me about it. And by the time that sort of started happening, they started getting stolen. Like people would go in and take the posters. And so like by the time I was doing like some of the media, we actually had to find, I can't remember how many I did, like a dozen or like 10 of them or something like that around the city. And then by the time we were actually doing the press for them with a news channel called CTV News, there's like 1 or 2 left, because people had been opening up and sort of stealing them, which I think is like the ultimate compliment if somebody, wants it that bad that they're willing to like break the law to get it.
Right. Yeah. No, true, dude. Seriously. That series is super rad. And I think that like kind of like, experiment, so to speak, was super, super cool in my mind.
Thanks, man.
Advice to me mostly, because we're talking, but I mean, coming from that perspective, watching the Peter McKinnon stuff that you've done, and a couple of the different, like that video on your site that I watched with, shooting the overpasses and things. Mm-hmm. Your studio is in your backyard. It's a garage you converted, right? That space, is that kind of like when you walk in there, you're immediately like just thinking like, what am I going to shoot? Like you're just excited to start doing stuff in that space. Like, does that help you kind of start getting your gears turning?
I think that's a great question. I mean, yes and no, like, and this is a good thing, but realistically, a lot of what that space is used for right now is signing prints, editioning prints, putting them in shipping tubes, and then driving them over to Staples and sending them FedEx to various clients or to different galleries. So that's like 100% full transparency. Like, I would love to use that space more as a shooting space. And I do. I mean, I was shooting in there yesterday, but a lot of that space has sort of turned into this like little factory where I'm authenticating pieces and then sorting through them and, you know, making sure prints are good. And, you know, there's a lot of like sort of just that kind of day-to-day stuff that's happening in there right now. But it is an inspiring space. I love being in there. It was an apartment until COVID. My friend moved to Detroit. That space was empty. I had a larger space in like an industrial part of the city that for a while I technically wasn't even allowed to go into because of the COVID rules and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, in that sort of like transition of the last, you know, couple of years with COVID and stuff, I was just kind of like, it's small in there, but I'm going to try it. I've had 2 studios in my career. This is my 3rd, and I've never owned either of them. They were cool. Like the first studio, especially, like it was really great to have in the formative years of my career. Like I had a really cool old loft with 2 stories and like a mezzanine for my office. I shared it with a really cool guy named Mac Guido, who, you know, is an amazing photographer in his own right, but I've never owned any of those spaces. And I was like, okay, well, like this is nice to be able to take ownership of the space that I have. And if I want to put in skylight or, you know, do some crazy shelving system, it's not like just burning money because right. I own that space and I can really make it my own. But it's where I go to work. It is inspiring in there. I like being in there, go in there, play some music, have a coffee, you know, right. It is good to be in there. And it is really nice to have that so close. Like if I feel like it at 2 a.m, I can go in there and start shooting, you know, East German Deutschmarks if I want to.
Sure.
That's what I'm going to do right now. Fuck it. I'm going in there. I'm going to do it. And that Ukrainian token that we were talking about earlier, that's exactly what happened. Like I came back from shooting a 3-day marathon furniture job. And then the token was in my mailbox. I had somebody drop it off. And then I was just like, you know what? I can't sleep right now. I'm just going to go do it. And then that morning it was ready to go. And that's an amazing feeling to be able to do that 24 hours a day. So I think it's a really long answer to a simple question.
No, that was a great answer because my thing is this too, and this is kind of an ongoing question to that one. But you know, for me, you know, I know I've sent you like a snapshot of my office and how I have this space set up, and I definitely feel very encouraged to create in this space. But the one thing that I would say is a complaint from me is that it's not separated from home. So my office is, you know, like a French, you know, or whatever you want to call it, double door, French doors, kind of access office off of my living room, which I love being able to just like stroll in here and I'm in the space and I can just start going right away. But what's hard for me is to actually say like, okay, I'm done with work for the day and I want to completely disconnect. Like what I think is really cool about your setup is you have this studio space that allows you to make that decision. I'm going to go in there and just kind of put blinders on to your house and home life and focus in on the project that you want to take on. Is that kind of nice to have as the option?
I will say like it's 2-part. Like I did like having a studio that I could like feel in the morning, like even though I've been self-employed since I was like, you know, 25 or 26 or something. So I had to sort of like learn to regiment my life because I don't have a boss. I don't check out at the end of the day. It's really like you eat what you kill. And if you don't kill anything, you starve, you know? So it's like, I've had to like be like, okay, morning, coffee, get in my car, drive to the studio, work, and then come back. And of course I have my phone. I can answer an email or 2, but I'm not at work. So there is something good about that. But here in my situation now at my house, like I got my studio, but I'm sitting in my office right now. Like this is gross. And I don't think this is necessarily what everybody wants, but I'm kind of always working, you know, like I don't care that like, you know, I'm also fortunate because listen, like I have kids and I'll have some like real responsibilities. I'm a big teenager basically. So, and I love what I do. So I don't care. Like if I want to, I'll just keep working if there's stuff to do. So I do not really have a separation at this point between sort of, work and play, or like I've got my office that's right next to my bedroom. That's around the corner that way. And then downstairs out to the backyard into the garage. And then I have another desk there with another monitor, and I work in there. And I was having this conversation with my brother recently, who's a really hardworking dude, but he's like, why do you have an office next to your bed if you've got a whole studio set up in the back? And it's just because, like, I don't know, it's just like in here's like, I got my like whiteboard, I got my stuff. And, I guess in theory, if I'm doing more like sort of bookkeeping type shit, it happens in here. And then out there is the more creative space, but they all overlap. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, hopefully if you're self-employed, you're doing something where you're not dreading work, most of the time, at least. We all do jobs that fucking suck. And you're like, oh my God, here's another email about this thing. Like, leave me the fuck alone. But if you're self-employed, most of the time, like, work's a good thing, and more emails is a good thing. And, more stuff to do is good. And I don't mind having zero separation between work and play, basically. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that's case in point with separation.
She's waking up from her little nap.
Yeah. Oh, that's the same. Like, that's what I'm like. I'm laughing because both the little ones were like on the sofa, living their best life, sleeping away. And we got a 105-pound pit bull back in the bedroom who literally is like the laziest dog ever now. Very odd trio of puppies we have, dude.
That's cool. Whereabouts do you live? So
we're in Gilbert, Arizona. So I grew up in Mesa. So if you know kind of the valley in general, because I know you've been out here. I from what research, you've shot like overpasses out here and whatnot, and probably projects.
I love it there. My brother's actually there right now. My brother's in Flagstaff.
Oh, nice.
And him and his girlfriend on vacation. They're going to Tucson. They're going to Flagstaff and all over. I love that part of the world, man. Like I'll meet you in real life eventually. Like I'll be out there eventually. Like,
dude, that'd be awesome.
I am, man. I love Arizona. I love the whole Southwest. The food's good. The people are cool.
Food's the best.
The landscapes are unbelievable. Like it's a magical place, man. Really,
I kind of laugh because I've primarily lived here my whole life, but I lived in North Idaho, so north of Coeur d'Alene, so in the panhandle of Idaho. Brutal winters, and it was so funny because super nice people in that part of the country, and when I met people, it was it was really cool how touching everybody was, just like so open and welcoming and super, down to introduce me to this guy and introduce me to that guy. And it was such a great networking thing that kind of naturally happened out there. But, God bless them. They would say like, oh, we have the best authentic Mexican food over here. You've got to try it. And we would go and it's like the most vanilla Mexican food you've ever tried in your life, with like no spice, no heat. So, I mean, I definitely know that like growing up out here, I'm a little bit pampered with the Mexican cuisine, which is fire. So
I know, man. We gotta meet up eventually and go for some tacos and margaritas or something.
Hell yeah, dude. That. It sounds like a plan to me.
Cool.
Dude, I really appreciate you. I'll make sure that we post, all the website links and the Instagram handles. Anything that you want to shout out that you want people to pay attention to?
No, I mean, listen, thank you for doing this interview. It's been really, really nice talking to you. I feel like we can just shoot the shit forever.
For sure.
And let me know if you have any questions. And for anybody who's listening, like for the most part, if you reach out to me on Instagram or through email or whatever, I try to get back to people, even if it's just like a brief note. Like I do read most of that stuff. And as long as you're, just genuinely interested, I want to help people out because people help me out. So like, let's just leave it there. Yeah. And if people are interested in the NFT project, it's more than zero.club is the, and it's all over my Instagram and stuff. You can't miss it. So go check that out if that's cool. And yeah, thanks again. And
dude, thank you
for the opportunity to be on your podcast.
I absolutely can't thank you enough. I mean, I know initially it was just kind of like me reaching out randomly to be like, what's up, dude? I think you're sick. You know, like I wanted to just do this as like a virtual happy hour. I didn't even think you'd want to do an episode. So,
no, I love it.
I am beyond humbled by, you doing this with me. And I hope that, people that do listen to this episode get something from it and maybe get inspired by you and come check you out. And maybe that just like lights a fire for somebody. So thank you so much, dude. I appreciate you.
Take care, man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to episode 5 of the Mikey Z TV podcast. I'm Mikey Z. For more information and show notes on this episode, go to mikeyz.com. And special thanks to Peter for coming on the show. Check out more about him at peterandrew.ca and make sure to check out the NFT release at morethanzero.club. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.